Welcome to Inspired Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter Swoboda, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change. So again, there's hopefully going to be some new listeners, and welcome back to all those of you who've been joining me for season 1 and hopefully now for season 3. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, as you may well be aware, the last couple of podcasts have essentially been about dealing effectively with chaos, crisis, and the unexpected, and possibly looking at what we believe to be uncontrollable circumstances. So where did I start with that? Well, firstly, it was about looking at developing a strategy, okay? Now that strategy has certain parts. And so one of those initial parts is to be more self-aware. And in the last podcast, I talked about becoming a psychological ninja. And on reflection, I didn't sort of really explain a lot about what I mean with that. And that is firstly that if I think about what a ninja is they've got this capacity to blend in and move through their environment without disturbing it a great deal. So how does this fit here? Well, firstly, in order to do that, we need to be firstly self-aware, and we need to be able to be centered in the moment. So I've talked about, how mindful practices offer a way for us to disengage from the hectic nature of our world around us. The other aspect to it is knowing and understanding how to identify what I have control over and what I don't. Okay, it's a very important distinction. Now, I've focused in the last session essentially with the idea of coping with negative emotions. And lots of people struggle with that. It's one of the foundations in actually being resilient or not being resilient. So if I don't know what to do with negative emotions, if I don't understand them, I'm going to have quite a bit of a problem in managing them. Now, I'm going to be a little bit trite. In a sense, emotions are neither negative nor positive. They're just emotions, they're feelings. But we make a judgment around them, and that's where we can get into trouble. So at this point in this podcast, I want to point out that essentially there's a couple of bits to emotions. Firstly is essentially emotions consist of sensations plus thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, or labels that we attribute to those sensations. And that's what we then come up with as a feeling. So to give you an example of that is that physiologically there's very little difference between excitement and when I feel fearful. The difference exists in my evaluation of those sensations. Okay? So for some people, riding a 50, 60 foot wave is exciting, it's thrilling. Now, they'll also talk about the fact that it's as scary as hell, but what they've learned to do is to channel that fear into that excitement that has them coming back again and again. Now, I'm not saying we should all practice this. I'm certainly at an age and of a place of wisdom where I'm going, I don't need to do that. I don't need to go out there and prove myself to that degree. So in this episode, one of the things I want to do is I want to focus on that whole notion of thoughts and beliefs. Okay, so if I'm going to be a psychological ninja, one, I need to be flexible and adaptable physically, but also emotionally and cognitively. And this podcast is about the cognitive, the thoughts aspect of this, okay? So when I talk about all of that stuff about cognition, I want you to think about it that all of us, in our own way, have our own inner conspiracy theories. Now, I know it's a bit topical, might be a little bit sort of, tongue-in-cheek, but it's in fact true when you think about it. What are conspiracy theories about? Well, they're about beliefs that we hold that are in fact not necessarily rational. We often put ideas together that we think belong together logically, but in fact they don't. Okay, and they exist on all sorts of different levels. Now, the unfortunate thing is they can have a massive impact. Now, let me go into your inner world. So, think for a moment. What are some of your inner conspiracy theories about yourself? Okay, just sit with that for a moment. If you've got a pen and a paper, take it out, write them down. See whether you can identify them. So let me explain a little bit about the types of conspiracy theories that you might hold, or those irrational beliefs. Now, fundamentally, categorically, they're about demands. And these are the primary irrational beliefs. They often feature phrases such as, I must, I have to, I should, I need, and ought to, and they're absolutistic. So for an example, I'd love to succeed, and therefore I have to. It doesn't give you exactly a lot of wriggle room around what happens if I actually don't succeed at this particular whatever it is that I'm trying to achieve, whether that be in sport, in relationships, academically, professionally. So the more invested we are in this inner demand, the more likely I am to create that bit of the conspiracy theory that goes, if I don't, then I am no good. So outside of that, most of our irrational beliefs and conspiracy theories about ourselves follow the following framework. So we tend to awfulize things. Now, in a therapy that I was trained in called rational emotive behaviour therapy, awful is defined as anything that is evaluated as being worse than 100%. So, for example, if I don't succeed at X, that will be awful. In other words, what I'm telling myself, my conspiracy theory about myself at that is, I'm convincing myself that because I didn't succeed at this, that I am just awful. I'm a failure. And again, in that context, failure is more than 100%, or at least equivalent. Now, no one is 100% of a failure, okay? So it's really important to be able to understand that I'm going to explode some of this to the point where it distresses or disturbs me, and where I can in fact start to encounter experiencing anxiety, okay? The second aspect to it is what we call low frustration tolerance. Now, low frustration tolerance is essentially an acknowledgement of a struggle, or that I'm asserting that that struggle is truly unbearable and I cannot, and I'm going to use this specifically, I'll not survive it. But we don't use that, I won't survive it. We usually go, I can't stand it. So it becomes a little bit like a phrase that I throw out in my head. Oh, I can't stand it. So, my boss didn't say hello to me this morning, and that I can't stand it when he or she does that. Or The traffic was terrible this morning, and I couldn't stand sitting there in the traffic, and it was just killing me. Now, that language is highly emotive, and it's in fact rubbish. For a start, you're stuck in your car. Where are you going to go? Okay, so that low frustration tolerance is really critical. It is also an active ingredient in dependencies, addictions. If I don't have that drink, or if I don't get to use, I can't stand it. We also apply that to pain a lot of times. When I was working with people in injury recovery, often their mantra was, I can't stand the pain, I can't stand the pain. But the reality is we need to find some other mechanism, because that pain may in fact not go anywhere. What we need to look at is the capacity to deal with that pain. And that goes for emotional pain. If my girlfriend dumps me, I can't stand it. Of course you can. It's going to be highly unpleasant, but in time you'll overcome that. You'll move beyond it. Now, the other aspect to this, in terms of irrational beliefs of our inner conspiracy theories, is that we have a conditional relationship to ourselves, or conditional self-acceptance. So this is where I define myself based on a particular aspect. So, for example, if I fail at something important, then I am a failure. Now, these are interconnected, and there are overlaps in all of this. But fundamentally, the important aspect to this is these beliefs, by definition, are irrational, because we can prove that through evidence. And we are going to encounter distress, in some cases anxiety, in other cases depression. In other cases, we try to deal with all of this through avoidance. Don't let me get into a difficult, complicated situation because I don't think I can cope with it. And so, I get this a lot, not just from adults, but teenagers are particularly good at telling themselves these inner conspiracy stories in which they disable their own adaptability and therefore their own resilience. So if we're going to deal with the world at large in all its shapes and forms, and other people in all of their ways, we need to be really discriminating about how we think, how we construct that inner belief and worldview that isn't a conspiracy against us, or that doesn't rock us to the core where we believe that we're not capable. So in rational emotive behavior therapy, one of the things that we talk about is the essential 4 rational beliefs. Okay, so the first one is about preferences. So rather than being demanding, preferring is a much more helpful attitude to have about life. For instance, I would love to succeed, but fundamentally I don't have to. It's not vitally important. So I don't have to get 100% on that exam, or I don't have to have everybody like me. It'd be nice. It'll be, again, a preference if that were to occur. But I can't demand that that's what's going to happen. The next one is about establishing an anti-awfulizing attitude. So nothing in this world could not be worse. And anti-awfulizing beliefs reflect this. For example, if I don't succeed in this course, it may be bad, but never truly awful. Remember that 100+% bad. It's not that bad. There's always a room for a wriggle room, essentially. There's always room to sort of go, it would have been nice if I got that 100%, but it didn't happen. I got 95. Or even if I got 60,